Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Mountaineer Locker Room. Then and now, I'm Greg Christ, joined by the other host. I don't call him co-host, Frank Fear. Frank, welcome to the show. We've got a lot going on, a lot to talk about tonight. Great guests and plenty of Mountaineer happenings we're going to try to squeeze in, and also special guests at the end of the show. Folks know him who have watched our show, and folks who are Mountaineer fans and basketball fans, East Coast, probably throughout the country, know him. Darryl Prue is going to join us toward the end of the show. So it looks like another good show lined up.
Yeah, excited about this. And we had a chance to talk with Keenan Cummings from WVUsports.com. Yep. And we're going to show the tape. And he's everything we had hoped for. You know, he's the real deal. We've been following his work. And it was just great to have a dialogue with him. And so he's going to give us a lot of, I think, keen insights into the football club. But it was you and I were talking about before we went on air. A lot of good things happening with women's basketball. The men are playing tonight at the same time. We'll keep you up to date. Got to beat Cincinnati. And the baseball team. What do you think about that baseball team?
Well, so far so good. Looking at this past series they won. So they're 3-0. But the thing that stood out to me about it was the pitching. We gave up, I think the most was 3 runs. I think we gave up 2, 2, and 3, I think is what the final scores were. So the fact that we only give up, 6 or 7 runs in a 3-game series, that stood out to me. I know it's early in the year, but if you can get that kind of production out of your pitching staff, you're going to be pretty good. And, that's any level of baseball. You got to have pitching. And I think that's a bright spot already. Hopefully it'll continue.
Yeah, and as we were talking, not only did they have a great series, and I was just looking at the stats with beating Jacksonville 3 games in a row down there, and you said this is the first time this has happened where they've won 3 games to start the season since when?
I think, and I may be a little bit off here on my dates, but I think they said 1957, I believe it was.
Unbelievable.
I'll have to check and make sure, but I'm almost certain that's what I heard him say. So that's pretty amazing right there. You would think it had happened sometime other than that, but apparently not. So off to a good start. That's good news because last year baseball team brought a ton of excitement and I think people are ready. They hate to see Coach Maisie go, but the new guy coming in looks like he's off to a good start, and I know people are excited about that. You mentioned Keenan Cummings there just a minute ago. It's funny you talk about the knowledge and the insight and all the things he told us. I have a brother, older brother, that lives down in Charleston, who is a huge Mountaineer fan, and he's one of these guys that follows all the recruiting and the portal and all those types of things. And so I told him, I said, you might want to watch this show. I said, you'll enjoy listening to this guy. Got a lot of good information. And so he said, oh, absolutely. He texted me a little bit ago and says, is there any way I can go back and watch the show after the Mountaineer game? I said, I think you can archive it.
Well, that is an issue, and we should probably talk about this for the audience. We try to keep it for Darren on New River, on the New River Network, and also for the Voice of College Football at the same time every week, 7 o'clock, and you do that consistently. And, when you're not in football season, you're going to run up against conflicts, but we keep it right there. And so, but the nice thing about having a video vault, being on Facebook, et cetera, is people can always watch later, and we see the numbers go up. And so a lot of people do that. I was going to mention about the baseball, and we didn't talk about this before the show. Now, what are the odds this is going to happen? And that is West Virginia's home season begins next Wednesday against Ohio.
Yeah, of course it does.
Is it going to happen? Are we going to play next week? We'll see. We'll see.
We'll see. Yeah, if it's anything like this Wednesday, then the answer is no, unless there's snowballs. But
that's right.
Weather's been pretty nasty here, and hopefully, I think it's supposed to improve some next week. It looked like the temperatures were high 30s, low 40s. So if they do get a play, it's going to be kind of chilly. So those aluminum bats will feel good in their hands, I'm sure.
That's right. And you were talking about the last year's team. And one of the exciting things for me, and I looked at the stats, and we were talking before the show, some of those familiar names had a hell of a weekend against Jacksonville.
Mhm.
Skylar King hit 600. Brody Kessler hit 556. Logan
Yep.
Sauve hit almost 400. Those are really good ball players, and we know them from
Yep.
last year. So we'll get
Yep.
excited. And also, those Mountaineer women, for Pete's sake, I mean, they not only beat K-State at home on President's Day, they really buried them. And K-State is the number one team in the league, and they've got to play
Yep.
TCU at home on Sunday. They have a nice break here, playing
Yep.
both games at home on Monday and then on Sunday. Let's keep our fingers crossed. We want them to get a really good seed in the NCAA and also obviously do well in the Big Ten tournament, and that's exciting too. And I might mention one more thing going back and forth. Talking with Mark Parsons, who is assistant producer of the show, he's excited this weekend because the baseball team is coming to Nashville to play
Yep.
Lipscomb in 4 games starting Saturday. And if you're in the Nashville area, there is the Mountaineers are going to get together, have a game watch because some of these games are going to be on ESPN Plus. They'll
Yep.
go to the game, and so check that out if you're in that area
Oh yeah.
to get
Yep.
with
Be a lot
fellow
of fun.
Mountaineers.
Be a lot of fun, and like I said, I know people are excited about it. You mentioned some of those players. Um, we kind of keep track too of former Mountaineers. JJ Weatherholt really made a splash in his debut with the big league teams, and that's exciting too because they. I know I was listening to one ESPN reporter talking earlier on about how he may have been the steal of the draft. And of course, he was drafted pretty high, but they said that he's just unbelievable. And they're going to miss him, obviously. But like you said, a lot of familiar names there that can play. And again, the pitching staff looked good, this past week. So hopefully that'll continue. The women's basketball team, I actually watched some of the game the other day against Kansas State. I didn't know it was on, and I was flipping channels. And I saw it. I thought, well, this must be a recording. And I flipped it over and watched it. I said, that's live. So I watched a good bit of it. And, one of the things that impressed me, and I've said this before, no offense to anyone, but I'm not a huge women's basketball fan. I love softball. I like watching play softball. But they are so aggressive and just get after people, and they're nonstop. They're like Energizer bunnies. They just go and go and go and go. And, watching that game, it just looked to me like they just wore Kansas State down. It just seemed like Kansas State was exhausted, and if they can keep that up, they'll be hard to beat. And well, they've been hard to beat all year. They've only lost 4 or 5 games, and but they're fun to watch. They're like the men's team. They're just fun to watch. And like I said, I don't watch a lot, but I did watch some of that, and it was pretty impressive.
Yeah, they're very good. And Quinterly is putting up some big numbers.
Yeah.
And as she goes, the Mountaineers go, and actually we're going to turn to Keenan now. But he even talked about the fans will hear this toward the end of his interview. He even brought up that NCAA game last year at Iowa and said, I think he was at the game and could have gone the Mountaineers' way. They really played the Hawkeyes really tough. But yeah, it's all exciting, all positive. Keep our fingers crossed for the men. They beat Cincinnati a few days ago, and hopefully they can do it again.
Yep, up 11, 12-6 actually right now with 15 minutes to go in the first half. One other thing, Frank, I wanted to mention, and again, I didn't talk to you about this beforehand, so I apologize for that. But Mike Smith, who was on our program several months ago, had posted a thing on Facebook about people who are wanting to donate money or other items for the flood relief, and he posted it up, and it's called Central Appalachian Flood Aid 2025. There's a website they can go to, floodaid2025.org, if they're interested in donating or helping out with the flood. I was looking at my phone there to make sure I had the address right, but it's floodaid2025.org. So I want to get that out there. Yeah, so people, I know Southern West Virginia was hit hard, as well as several areas in Kentucky, which are not far from, you get down into Williamson, you're right there in Kentucky. Williamson got blasted, and so did some of the surrounding areas and down in there. So if people want to help, they can go to that website and pitch in and help. Back to Keenan. We're ready to show our video with him. It was a great interview, very entertaining, very interesting. I think people will enjoy it. So, Darren, you can take it away whenever you're ready.
Well, we're excited here on the Mountaineer Locker Room Then and Now to have a special guest with us. Frank and I talk often and every week just about the Mountaineer football program, what's going on with recruiting, what's going on with the portal. However, we're very fortunate. Keenan Cummings is going to join us. Knows the ins and outs of what's going on, not only in the Mountaineer world, but in college football and Big 12 specifically. So we want to welcome him to the show and get started here with Keenan. Keenan, welcome to the show. We appreciate you coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Always good time to talk about kind of what you do all the time.
Yeah, well, you do it all the time, that's for sure. And as this year, especially for WVU, kind of an odd twist of things, if you will, I guess most people would say, getting Coach Rich Rodriguez back in the fold and taking over. And I know Frank and I talked about this the other night. The expectations already are running wild, with the dreams of undefeated seasons and that sort of thing. But as well as any true fan that studies it, that's a process, and he's coming in and trying to, as Frank often phrases it, putting Humpty Dumpty back up on the wall. And he's in the midst of that right now, getting started with the portal, with recruiting. Just give us your take on what's going on in Morgantown.
Well, active is the best word to describe it. West Virginia has been quite busy when it comes to kind of adjusting the roster, finding guys. They added, I believe, 31 transfers. 30 of them, to my knowledge, are enrolled. So that's a big number. 12 newcoming freshmen, and then you signed, I think it was 7 more. Now they won't enroll until May, but 7 more. So you do the math there. That's 19, 31, 50 guys, 40 guys, whatever it is. That's a lot. Well, now there are going to be some changes here coming up. I think it's important to tell people with the House settlement, a lot of people think the roster number is going to move from 85 to 105. Now, none of that's official until it's official, but I think obviously coaches around the country are kind of preparing for that. So you're seeing more numbers. But if you look at the classic 85 model, I mean, that's almost 2/3 of your team that's going to be completely new to the program. So a lot of that was, a necessity. West Virginia lost a lot of seniors, really good senior class. Didn't necessarily translate into results on the field, but obviously a lot of good players this past year. And then they had some guys leave. I think it was 18 guys left in the transfer portal. Some of them you really hated to see leave. If you were a fan of West Virginia, you could go down the list. C.J. Donaldson, Hudson Clement, Trey Lathan, some guys they really wanted to keep. But that's the nature of the beast. But West Virginia's, to their credit, has been aggressive. They've gone out and found guys that have played really well at their previous stops. There's no guarantee in this, guys. That's the first thing. Let me tell you, I don't care how well someone's played at their previous stop. There's no guarantee. It's like anything else in recruiting, but you like to see that the guys that they're bringing in are experienced, especially in areas they needed it. Defensive back, edge rusher, defensive end. I think they've a couple really experienced wide receivers. You're looking for either upside if they're young, or experience and talent if they're older, and they've got a good mix there. So I think that we'll see how it goes. We're going to find out a lot, with spring practice starting next week, kind of what it looks like and how it all comes together and what they're going to need in the spring transfer window. But so far, it's hard to complain with, they're working hard. They've been active and really filled a lot of their needs.
You see a big difference in the approach that Rich Rodriguez is taking now, as opposed to what Neil Brown did. We kind of felt like Neil Brown kind of figured it out, by the end of his tenure, that he was going in the portal and getting specific needs. At first, it just seemed like he was taking whoever he could get. Later on in the portal, it seemed like he was getting players that filled specific needs. Do you see a different approach from Coach Rodriguez
this year? But I think that's more by the situation. I'm not necessarily sure it's fair to judge because he came in a situation where, as we mentioned before, he lost a lot of players.
Right.
They have to fill needs. I mean, if they want to be competitive in the Big 12, they have to fill needs. But I agree with you on Brown. I thought they did a really good job, at least on this front, of developing players over time. You know, all those guys I mentioned that left were guys that started as freshmen
Yeah.
that Neil developed over time and then filling their major needs through the transfer portal. I'm not sure. There's some schools that want to do a clean slate every year. There's some schools that like that development approach. I think for West Virginia's sake, the development approach seems to be one that's had a lot of success over the years. Under Rich's first term, you know, under Don Nealon, you know, you go back, it's had a lot of success, but it's too early to really see what the difference is. But if they're aggressive every year, my fingers are going to fall off from typing.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever seen a span. I've done this 15 some years and I followed it well before that. I don't know if I've ever seen a span where there's 40 some commitments in a month long period.
Yeah. Yeah, we kind of got the feeling. Again, I'm stepping on Frank here, but we kind of got the feeling that, you know, he was just trying to get as many in as he could so he could evaluate them and then give them a chance to go on somewhere else if they didn't work out. And it just seemed like a flood of people coming in. You're trying to keep up with it, and you just every day it's just like, okay, there's 4 more and 5 more, and it just never seemed to stop. You know, so we're thinking, well, he's getting as many in as he can, and you know, so he can evaluate because in his situation with you know, coming in like he has with the empty cupboard, it's going to take bodies, and yeah, apparently he's well on his way. Frank, you want to jump in there with a question?
Well, I've enjoyed listening to you guys because what you're saying is basically, as I've been looking at this, particularly in terms of the difference this year, so different from what we did last year in terms of being able to try to get a better sense of what's going on. It's much more complicated. Keenan, a couple things. First of all, there's going to be obviously some no pun intended, keen competition during spring practice going into the spring game, even if it's an abbreviated spring game. And one of the positions everybody's looking at is quarterback, obviously. You know, Nico was a favored son of Neil Brown, and he was going to inherit the quarterback position, no question about that. But now you've got a couple other guys, particularly Jalen Henderson, but there are others as well. What's your we don't want to put you on the spot, but what's your take in terms of that how the quarterback competition might evolve?
Well, I think that's a great question because truthfully, it's going to be the position that's on everybody's mind. I don't care what other things are happening in your program. If you don't have a set quarterback, it's going to be the one thing that most fans are talking about. It's just kind of the nature of the beast. I do think that it was interesting to me that Rich Rodriguez, we haven't had any set down media sessions with him yet, but he has done some things on the radio and that kind of thing. We actually get him later this week, so that'll be interesting. But I thought it was interesting. He basically kind of brushed off naming any kind of starter in the spring. He really said he wants to find 2 guys, maybe 3 guys he can win with. And I think that's by design. You know, you kind of want to get this, whether or not Nico is the guy today or whoever's the guy today, it doesn't matter. It's going to be the guy who's the guy in August. And I think they're going to stretch this out and kind of see what they got here. You know, you don't bring in 2 experienced quarterbacks, and Jalen Henderson and Max Brown, unless you're trying to create competition. And I don't see it any way that that's going to hinder Nico. You know, if Nico's the guy, he's going to earn it. It's a new coaching staff. That's the way it works. And, you know, there's some young guys on the roster. Khalil Wilkins was a redshirt freshman last year. I've seen him throw and I've seen him play in person. He's big. He can run. You know, I think he could fit Rich's scheme. And then obviously Scotty Fox, very athletic. He kind of a lot more athletic than people give him credit for, and a really good arm. He's a guy that I loved early on. You know, I thought West Virginia got a steal in him, and as other people were able to kind of evaluate him, he ended up a 4-star on Rivals. Mm-hmm. So I think that kind of speaks to his talent level. But I know a lot of people, when they think of Rich's offense, they think of Pat White. You know, everybody's got to be Pat White or Rasheed Marshall. That's not the case. If you watch Jacksonville State last year, Tyler Huff was not Pat White. Nico Markhill could do what Tyler Huff can do. I think the thing that's going to help Nico, and I don't know if it wins him the job or where it puts him in the hierarchy, but he brings that toughness that Rich is looking for. If you watched him play last year in limited snaps he was running over guys, he runs hard, he plays hard, he's got an edge to him. And it's cliche, but I do think that matters to Rich a lot. So it's going to be interesting to see. Me personally, today, I would be shocked if anything comes out of spring. I would kind of be shocked until, you're getting close to the season. If you get an announcement, I think if you're betting today, Nico would be the favorite. But what's that really mean with a new coaching staff? I mean, all the reps you've had were under a different scheme. You did a different thing. So we're going to find out, but it's good to have options. I think that West Virginia is in a much better position today than they were when Rich inherited the program, just by forcing more competition.
Yeah, and you brought up the coaching staff. One of the things that we've seen is that coaching staff has expanded. I think it's at 30, if not more, right now, Keenan. And what everybody's looking at obviously is got to shore up the defense. That was a straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak, last year, particularly late, particularly on the back end. And so, your thoughts about the coaching staff? Not only the quality, but the numbers, and also your thoughts about that defensive side of the ball, particularly the back end.
Well, I was joking with my friends. I don't know what they've had more of, commits or coaching announcements, just because it's the nature, the way it's changed, just everything with college sports. Now, essentially, I think fans need to realize that if they don't, every coach can kind of on-field coach now. It used to just be 10. You had other guys in your program, but now every guy that's in the program can on the field coach. So it's leading to these, I guess, I don't want to say bloated, because I think obviously everybody else is doing it, but I will. Bloated coaching staffs, a ton of guys. You basically, if you go down the list, you have a position coach, you have an assistant to the position coach, then you might have an analyst, and it kind of goes from there. But I do think that West Virginia did a good job. Rich Rodriguez said as soon as he got hired in his introductory press conference, he was going to place a strong emphasis on the coaching staff. And he wanted to get good guys he can win with, surround himself with good people. And, you look at his contract, he kind of took a pay cut in relative sense to what other Big 12 coaches are making to kind of make that happen. And when you go out and take Zach Alley from Oklahoma, I mean, that doesn't happen every day at West Virginia. I don't care who you are. I've done this a long time. I don't remember very many times that West Virginia's been able to really I know he was a co-defensive coordinator at Oklahoma, but he called the plays there last year. So he had that freedom from Venables. I don't remember many times that West Virginia is plucking coordinators like that schools are trying to keep. So I think that kind of speaks to what Rodriguez had said. Obviously, they had worked together at Jacksonville State. They'd had a history, but he also had a history with Venables. That was kind of his mentor. And I know there's a situation in Oklahoma now. It's a little shaky, but it's still a very good job. And he was well compensated. But obviously, West Virginia made that even better. So I think getting him is going to help really defensively. He's had success everywhere he's went, really multiple scheme. I would be surprised if it's not an odd front. I don't know how they're going to run it really. He's done some stack. He's done some other stuff. When he was at Oklahoma, Venables has typically ran a 4-man front, so they ran that. But he'll probably mix it in, do quite a bit of different things. He's really kind of disguised blitzes, a lot of different things on that front. So I think that'll be exciting for fans. One of the things that Rich kind of talked about initially is he wanted to be aggressive, force the issue. And I think if you ask most West Virginia fans, that's been a problem defensively. There's been times, there's been seasons that's not the case, under Neal, but for the most part, that's been a problem. And that's something that kind of Zach Alley prides himself on. And they've done a good job filling out the secondary with coaches that have experience and really have done well at previous stops. So I think, if anything, the defense is exciting. We're going to see how the personnel aligns with what they got with so many new faces. I do think it's helpful in the secondary that West Virginia went out and signed 9 transfers. All 9 are one-year guys. So they've all played a lot of football at different stops, different levels. One of those, Justin Harrington, was actually a starter at Oklahoma for a couple games before he got hurt. And Michael Coates was first team, all Mountain West at Nevada. So you've got guys that have played a lot of football and really well at a high level. The thing that I've been encouraged, and I should have mentioned this during the initial transfer spiel, was the thing I've been most encouraged with a lot of these transfers is you can look at their advanced metrics, and all of them for the most part. Not every single one, but most of them check out. They graded out well in coverage or tackling or things that you needed to see to kind of have a successful defense. Now we'll see how it translates. Everybody's different, but I'm optimistic that West Virginia takes a step forward, even with all the changes, at least in terms of the secondary.
Well, that's encouraging news. I know Frank and I joke often talking about the coaches that maybe we could get a job as an assistant to the assistant's assistant, and we could be working up there as well. So, yeah, it is. That's just part of the change, Joe. I know. You mentioned that in college football where you can be on field coaching now, so that's going to be more, visible to people. They're going to see that more, I'm sure. But it seems like he's done a pretty good job, like you said, bringing in, the defensive coordinator, and then you throw in. Of course, the fan favorite, Pat White. I think that does a lot for the, I don't even know how to say it, but the feeling between, fans and the staff and that sort of thing. It creates a good atmosphere, if you will. But I think, Frank and I even talked about this. Pat White has coached quite a bit since he left college, and that he's not he's not just somebody I think they hired just for the for the look of it. I think he's probably, pretty seasoned coach. I mean, he's a young guy, but he's still coached quite a bit.
Yeah, he's coached at the NFL level and had success. He's coached at the college level. Back to your point, though, I think it's so funny, whenever a job opens, I don't care who it is, it's like, well, hire, a wide receiver job, for example. Someone says hire Stedman Bailey. Hire whoever, whatever former players. So there is some good vibes with that. And I think it's reflective of kind of their responsibilities. Pat White obviously has more than Noah Devine, who's kind of just really getting into coaching. He's going to be the assistant running backs coach, but Pat is qualified. He's coached quarterbacks, he's coached receivers, even at the NFL level with the Chargers. So not only is there that nostalgia running through and everybody's so excited to have, a good legend back on campus, but the guy's qualified too. And that's going to help.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of people think, because they played, they're a good coach, or they'll be a good coach just because they
played.
Two different
things.
That's right. Yeah. I can attest to that. You don't have to be a player to be a coach, or or have played to be a good coach, and you can do it without that. But yeah, the experience is immeasurable because you want people coming in that know what they're doing. And I know the, like they said, the nostalgic part of it's great. But when when your paycheck's on the line, I think you probably toss a little nostalgia out the window and say, I need people that can coach. I don't think that's going to be a big decision part of it.
Yeah, and I tell people this all the time too. Like I cover recruiting, obviously, and how cool is it? Now I'm getting a little dated now. I'm not trying to make Pat seem old, but getting a little bit dated. But when I first started this business, that's the name I heard all the time. Everybody, if you talk West Virginia, they're talking Pat White. That's kind of shifted to Tavon Austin, which makes me feel a little bit, I'm not that old yet, guys, but I have kids that tell me they grew up watching Tavon Austin when they were little kids. And I'm like, what? Like I was out of college at that point. But I think that helps on recruiting for West Virginia. If you're a quarterback, a guy that's played at that type of level, instructing you or talking to you, recruiting you, that kind of stuff plays. Same thing at running back with Noel Devine, guys that had success playing in the scheme. Now, I know Noel didn't finish his career in the same scheme, but he started it and played very well as a freshman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Frank, he mentioned Tavon Austin. He didn't mention Mickey Plumlee or Charlie Fisher or Jeff Hostetler, or if he wants to talk about aging himself. That's good.
Yeah. Fair.
That's right. Keenan, we also bring back players like Rich is doing. Our show is Mountaineer Locker Room Then and Now, and you're part of the now. But just about every week we have a former alum, basketball or football, on the show, mostly football. We'll have Darryl Prue on after you on Wednesday night. But, and I'll say this, one of the themes, and we don't solicit it, but one of the things that comes out over and over again, it came out last week from a player, is former players feeling welcome back in the program, and having coaches now, former Mountaineers as coaches, helps elevate that feeling. And in fact, last week we had a player basically said, I'm going back now. I hadn't been back for a few years. I don't know if you've heard that, but from where we sit, that's really important. You want to keep, but you want to have those former football and basketball players feel close to the program, saying good things about the program, feeling that they're welcome back, and spreading the word.
Yeah, I do. I do think that's important. And I think Rich obviously gets that. You know, that was something he did, in his first tenure. You know, that's something when he got introduced, something he said he wants every former Mountaineer player to come back, regardless of who you played for. Yeah. And I think that's part of building a program. You know, there a lot of guys are invested and put a lot of time into building this thing up over the years. And anytime you can bring those guys back and kind of show them some appreciation and celebration, it's a good thing. You know, I think that Neil made some strides on that. After things were a little rocky at times under Dana, it really depends on who you talk to too. You know, I've talked to some players that loved it under Dana and thought Neil was a little weird and vice versa. So I'm not sure there's a perfect thing, but I do think Rich gets it. You know, he's from here, he's played here, he gets it in a way that not a lot of people do, unless you kind of live it. So I think that that's going to help make that even better. You know, I think you're already seeing kind of the fruits of that labor. You know, look at Pat McAfee talking about West Virginia on his show. Probably more, he was doing it already, but having Rich Rodriguez's press conference, you know, that doesn't happen typically. Get that kind of coverage for something like that, especially where West Virginia was in the hierarchy of things at the time. So, you know, having stuff like that, you know, Pac-Man, like how vocal he's been, you know, other people bringing back Pat White, you know, as a coach, you know, all these things are just really cool to see, and it helps build those bonds that makes this place special in a sense. You know, it's always been, you know, I grew up here, you know, I went to school at West Virginia. Obviously, I kind of wear a different hat now covering the team, but I get it too. You know, it's kind of, you grow up thinking it's us against the world, you know, West Virginia, everybody's united. So I kind of get that from both sides. And that's when you play here, when you're a fan here, you know, when you cover here, it's kind of all the same thing in a sense. You know, you really kind of get it.
Switching gears just a little bit, what are you looking at the schedule that was released there a couple weeks ago? What's your thoughts on WVU schedule?
I'm not going to say it's the easiest schedule of all time because I would be lying to you, but I don't think it's awful. Is that fair to say? And then, of course, I do this every year. We tend to judge schedules off what happened the year before, and that's just so misinformed. But I don't know any other way to do it.
Right.
In today's world with the transfer portal, it's so crazy, guys. Like you look at West Virginia's roster. It's hard enough to keep up with West Virginia's roster. Imagine keeping up with 15 other rosters in the league. So that's why when these polls come out, like, guys, you can try as hard as you can. You're not going to know other teams' rosters nowadays. It's just there's 40, 50 guys coming in and out. Sometimes Colorado had like 70 the other year, or I think it was 2 years ago, 70 new players. It's insane. So I do think looking on the surface, you know, West Virginia does not have consecutive back-to-back road games. I know they got a break with a bye. You'd like to have seen the bye a little bit earlier in the season. I think the first one, but you got to take it where it is. I don't like the bye right before the end of the year. I'm kind of wondering what was going on with that scheduling. But, you know, the teams they get, you know, you got a couple tough road games. You get some good ones at home. I think obviously a good start would go a long way. You know, you get, you know, FCS team, and then you have to go to Ohio, which isn't easy. Ask Iowa State a few years ago. They lost up there. But if you win that game, you come home and play a Pitt team that really you could probably argue you could be undefeated against since this series started without some late game mishaps. But you can win that one, and then you get into conference play. Kansas is going to be tough. They return a lot of guys, and also they really hit the transfer portal hard. You know, you got some other teams on there that are going to be pretty good too. Arizona State, you know, go down the list, but it's too early for predictions. I'm not qualified to do that yet, but I do think that there's a chance for West Virginia to have a pretty successful season. And I guess successful is in the eye of the beholder, but, you know, in year one, I always kind of look at things a little bit different than most people would. You know, I think if they get to 7 or 8 wins, that's a really good year in year one, especially with all the turnover we've been talking about.
Yeah, that's exactly what I told Frank the other night. I said if we could win 7, 8 games, it would be to me a successful season. And we were talking about some of the unreal expectations, that unrealistic expectations people are having just because Rich Rod's here. And I said, it's hard to walk in and be undefeated. Taking over a program, rebuilding it, and be undefeated, and that's what people were talking about. And I'm like, that's not likely to happen.
Yeah,
Hope I'm
I
wrong,
mean,
but
I think if you're in a sense, though, I always look at it this way. That's the fun of being a fan.
that's right.
I'm a Cleveland Browns fan, and trust
Oh,
me, I know what it's like to lose. And
a man,
every
a
year
man
I'm
after my
optimistic.
heart. I meet very few Cleveland Brown fans.
Every year I'm optimistic, and so I get it. Like I get it from fan, because really it's kind of like everything else. I've had some people ask me about recruiting. It's like, well, do you think they can land that kid? And I'm like, well, they better. If you don't think you can do it, then what are
That's
you
right.
doing?
Yeah, why
Everybody on the
bother?
roster better believe they're going 12-0, going 13-0, going to the
Yep.
college football. Because I mean, if you don't believe it, who is?
Right.
But
Right.
hey, that's the fun of being a fan, though. Be a
That's right.
fan, and then obviously the team. But then you got other people. Some people are pessimistic, but like I said, I think that if you can find a way to 7 or 8 wins with the schedule they have, I think that's really good in year one, because
Yeah.
it's not the easiest slate.
Yeah.
I don't know, Keenan, if you do this or not, but and sorry, Frank, I didn't mean to jump over you there, but I want to go back to the Cleveland Brown thing. I don't meet Cleveland Brown fans very often, so when I do, I got to talk to them a little bit. But I always, I don't know if you did this, but I always compared, and I would tell people, if you are a WVU fan, you know what it's like to be a Cleveland Brown fan. If you're a Cleveland Brown fan, you know what it's like to be a WVU. Just when you think we're there, something happens.
Yes.
Throws us back.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's we could go on about this for a while. Perfect example was a couple like what was it last year? I felt like they were turning the corner. They go and beat Baltimore. Deshaun Watson
Yep.
plays the best game of the season, and then it's
That's
just
it.
derailed after that. But we'll
That's
see
it.
what they do with the number 2 pick.
It's
Mm.
funny. The other day, I was explaining to my wife. Well, of course, you may not even know these references, but Red Right '88 and the fumble and the drive, all those things happened back in the '80s. And I was explaining to her, trying to get across to her how it feels to be a Cleveland Brown fan, how you've had your heart ripped out so many times. But
Mhm.
anyway, enough of that. Enough of that. Frank, go ahead with your question.
Well, you were talking, Keenan, about how difficult it is to predict. We always ask this question, and you're in a catbird seat to speculate with the best of them, and that is, where do you think this college football thing is going with obviously the House settlement is coming, revenue sharing. And one of the things that Greg and I talk about all the time, and it's with fingers crossed, is the possibility of getting back to regional play. Because our thing right now, and see how you respond to this, is that you got two conferences trying to control the future of college football, Big Ten and the SEC, and the question is whether or not conferences play the same kind of role they've played historically, and if we could just reshuffle the cards, particularly for a school like West Virginia to be able to get back to playing Maryland and Virginia Tech and Boston College and Syracuse, Pitt, possibly even Penn State on a regular basis. But that may be wishful thinking. Your take on where you think the puck is going in college football, to mix metaphors.
Well, I'll make it clear I agree with you. I use the phrase they need to go backwards to go forwards all the time in college sports, but I'm not sure with the genie out of the bottle we're going to get there. We're kind of at the stage now where I would be very surprised if the House settlement is not ultimately passed. I think they've kind of cleared way for that with the Title IX stuff that come out this week, making that not a big deal. So I think that was a hurdle. They've cleared that. As long as everything's okay by April 7th, that should be approved. Once that's approved, it's going to change the game. There's going to be a lot of changes to college football because of this. You'll have roster size changes, uh, scheduling changes. I think you'll probably have calendar changes as well. One thing that's kind of being bantered about already, even with the House settlement still kind of up there, is spring football. We were talking about spring football earlier, getting ready to start. There's coaches that don't want to have spring games because teams are poaching their players. I think that coaches are pushing for one portal window. Now, I don't know if this will occur, but they would like one portal window in January, in early January. I think that becomes an issue with some schools because schools are on different kind of quarters or semesters. So how are you going to make it work? How are you going to get guys in? So I think that could be an issue for some schools in that. So and I think there's a lot of changes coming, guys. I don't have all the answers. I'm not even going to pretend like I have all the answers. I kind of follow it and cover it, but there's a lot of change on the horizon. Would I like to see things regionalized? Yes, I think it makes sense. It's not that hard to kind of, well, I guess it is hard for people to give up money, but you would think it wouldn't be hard for adults in a room to kind of figure out that, we can split this thing. When this branches off, there will be, the P4. I know there is already, but it's going to be more prevalent. And I think that it really, you guys mentioned it, the P2, really, if you want to be honest, they're kind of the overarching, leaders of this whole deal. And then you got the ACC and the Big 12 holding on to a leg, hoping they don't fall off. So we'll see where it goes. Ultimately, it would make a lot of sense to me to have the ACC and Big 12 merge at some point. I don't know if you do it at a conference or split them up or whatever you want to do, but I just don't see any way that those two leagues are going to be able to realistically, without some kind of help, chase those other two leagues. There's just too many brand names. There's too many things, but that's a long ways off. Hopefully, hopefully we find out where this is going to go and an idea of what's going to happen. But right now, there's a lot of uncertainty. I do think there's going to be some guarantees, though. I do think they're going to change roster size. The calendar is going to get moved around. I think they're going to go to a summer OTA type deal. That will be your spring. It kind of already is in a sense, guys, because, I know there is spring football, but the coaches kind of want all their players there for the summer because those summer OTAs are so important, and that's when your roster's set. So I think that kind of already is in that direction without formally, but there's going to be a lot more coming. I mean, I don't have all the answers. I think it's going to be funny to see just how different the product is now 5 years from now, because I think it is going to be different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Frank and I have talked a lot about about the regional play, and we've even discussed how we hope that and you would think the Big Ten and the SEC would look at this thing and say, if we have everybody involved, there's going to be plenty of pie for all of us. If we isolate ourselves, it's going to limit the growth potential, and kind of modeled after the NFL. We've talked about that, and get your divisions and your regions and that sort of thing. Seems to me would be so much more. And I think we talked about the money that was being made, like in the NFL, with the $30 billion business, and then one of our guests was talking about it, and then you look at the NCAA football, and it's $4 billion, which is not to us not chump change, but it could be if everybody's in the pod together. It would seem to be so much more beneficial for everyone, including the Big Ten and the SEC. So we're hopeful that regional stuff comes through.
Yeah, I've always heard this theory, and I don't know if there's truth to it, but television likes kind of the NFL model for college football. But me personally, that's not what I want to watch. Like, if I'm going to watch NFL style football, I'm going to watch a superior brand in the NFL. And when I think about, what made college football so special and made me want to cover it and made me care about it so much is the tradition, the regionality, the rivalries, the pageantry. I don't care about Indiana versus USC or Auburn versus Texas. I don't. I'm not going to just randomly watch those games. And I know everybody's different, but outside, like if I'm not working, I'm not going to watch those games just because those two teams are playing. But hell, I might watch the Chargers and Patriots because it's a better brand of football.
Right. Right. Yeah, we had talked about that. The fact that maybe WVU and Pitt don't have the following on the scale of a USC, for example, but that generates a lot of viewers, and we're all going to watch that, and most people in the East are going to watch it. But like I told Frank, I would watch Michigan and Ohio State probably, but I'm not going to watch Ohio State and Rutgers. got no interest in that. So yeah, I think that that what you're saying is that's what you want to see. You want to see these local, West Virginia, Pitt, West Virginia, Virginia Tech, those teams play, and I think that would generate so much more interest, not just here, but I think all over the country. I think if you have your regional rivalries in place, it's going to help. It's got to help, and I would think viewership, the money would be generated, and again offset what the SEC and the Big Ten feel like they might lose by being cooperative, if you will.
I mean, that's the thing. I mean, you look at these schools in these two leagues, and it just seems like there's such an easy solution here. Like you mentioned, regionalize it, breaking it up,
Yeah.
regionalize everything. But then you got to give up money, and then you got to break TV contracts, and
Yeah.
so it's more complicated than it seems. But I agree. I mean, like I opened with, let's go forwards to go. You got to go backwards to go forwards.
Right,
Mhm.
right. What do you see? When you go, as an insider here, going to the spring game, what are you looking for when you go, to watch that and to report on that?
Well, let's see how much of a game it actually is first.
Well,
Because
we've heard that
it's
not gonna be
probably a
game.
bad sign they're already calling it a showcase.
Yeah.
They've dropped the gold blue game. It's a gold blue showcase, but
Yeah.
we will get some spring practice access, I imagine. I want to see, how positions are faring. I want to see newcomers, how they're looking. No, we're probably not going to get a lot of 11 on 11 guys. I think a lot of people think when the media goes to practice, it's like a scene out of a movie where they're just running full 11 on 11 most times. It's usually drill work we get to see, we'll get a couple snaps here or there. Yeah, but I want to see. I tend to like to watch how the quarterbacks throw. Even if it's on air or just throwing to the net. I like to watch how they're doing. Extra footwork, that kind of thing. And I'm big on line. I always have been. I like to see how linemen are progressing and kind of how guys are filling roles. It's interesting to me, especially in practice settings, so you can experiment more, how they move guys around, where guys are playing, and kind of I know people always say, well, it's not a depth chart, and it isn't a depth chart. I mean, guys work in practice all over. But it's interesting to me if you go 3 times in 3 days and guys are working in the same spot, and then the first game comes around and those guys are working in those spots, you're like,
Mhm.
wasn't a depth chart, was it?
Yeah. Keenan, you were talking about, and it's real. I mean, the fact that you showcase your players in the spring game, coaches are watching that, and there may be some poaching going on. And it reminds me of the old days. I was at Michigan State for a number of years, and I would watch the Big Ten channel, and the Big Ten channel would go, do the spring games, go to practices, and make reports. And I remember one year, Gary DiNardo was a Northwestern coach, LSU coach, was on there. He's on the channel. And so they went to the Michigan State deal. And there's this player nobody was talking about, a two-star. Who talks about 2 stars? And I remember it. DiNardo gets on there and said, there's a running back here that nobody knew about, nobody talked about. He would have gone to Bowling Green. And I just couldn't believe it. It was Le'Veon Bell. And so if you think about today, going back then, other coaches would have said, let's offer that guy a ton of nil money, even though he had no track record at that point. But yeah, they got to be very careful because they can lose their players. He works hard to grab players, and then if they look too good, they may be gone after spring. So it all makes sense. You got to fit it to the context.
Yeah, and Matt Rules even said that, in Nebraska, like last year when they had their big televised spring game, they had several guys try to get poached. And I think that's kind of sad. That's what it's become. But they're rules, but there are no rules. So we're in a weird spot in college football right now. I think the House settlement, and that's what I was talking about earlier with so much uncertainty. I think the House settlement will correct some of this, but I don't know how you stop it. I really don't, because a lot of the ways this works is, guys have intermediaries. It's not necessarily coaches contacting guys, it's other people. And, you've seen it here in the past in some instances from outside influences, and it's just tough. I mean, the toughest parts are when you're not around your players, when they go home for a month in May, or, when they're on winter break. That's tough because they're around other people, other influences. It's harder to reel them back in. And, yeah, I understand the concept. I cover it daily. You can go into the portal and pull your name out. That doesn't happen often. West Virginia had, what was it, 19 guys, 20 guys going to the portal. One pulled their name out. One.
Yeah.
And
That's
over
right.
the career that I've done this, I think that number's maybe 3. Michael Laughlin did it. Maybe one other at one point, but most of the time they go in, they ain't coming back.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, Greg, the deal we made with Keenan, he's got to flip
Right.
the script. He's got to do his
Yep.
own interview. But we
That's
don't
right.
want to let you go without a few words on WVU basketball. Both men and women, you've got to, when this tape plays on Wednesday night, you'll be covering the Mountaineers. But your thoughts about, talk about putting Humpty Dumpty back on the wall. The Mountaineer basketball team, men and the women, are doing great. Big win over Kansas State on Monday night.
Yeah, the women are doing great. I think Kellogg's done a fantastic job. They're going to go to the NCAA tournament again. Probably should have won that game last year in the NCAA tournament. We'll get past that, but I know that's a sore spot for some people. But the men, I think that West Virginia's at a critical junction of this season, guys. They need to get wins. They need to find them quickly. They have 6 games left. A big game with Cincinnati. Obviously, both these teams are 15-10. You look at the net, West Virginia's 44th, Cincinnati's 45th. You kind of already hold that trump card over them where you beat them, on their home floor. I'm not sure that these two teams are directly competing for one spot, but if you're competing on the bubble, you're competing with every team. And the more that what West Virginia's had some slip-ups recently, the more closer they get to that bubble line. They're not really on it yet. I'd say you look at most projections, they're kind of on that 10 line. They're still safely in. Some of them have them down to the last 4 in, or first 4 in, I mean. But, you got to find a way to win. I think the magic number for West Virginia is 19. I think if you get 19, you're in for sure. I don't know if that's I don't know if 19 in the tournament gets you there if you beat like a Colorado, game 1. But I think if you get 19 in the regular season, you're in. Regardless of what happens in the tournament. But I do think that even with, some of the frustration of late and what's happened, you really got to look at the job that Darren DeVries has done. It's been really impressive. I mean, it really has. They were already a short bench before they lost 2 guys for the season. One of those guys, obviously Tucker DeVries' son, one of the best players, if not the best player on the roster. Be hard to argue with the way Javon Smalls played, but still, I mean, coming into the season, 2-time MVC player of the year, he was going to be that other guy. And you saw it early in the season. He could take some pressure off Javon Small. They give him the ball and he could facilitate and do some things with it that they're kind of missing right now in a sense. So having him would be huge. And, people forget about Jaden Stone. He probably would have been the first guy off the bench. That's a big loss too. He got hurt in the preseason and outside the exhibition game hasn't played all year. So there's some big losses, but they've still found ways to win. They've beaten some very good teams. Their resume stacks up pretty nice, honestly. I know I mentioned 15-10, but they're 5-7 in quad 1 games. I was mentioned Cincinnati earlier. Cincinnati, I believe, is 1-9 in quad 1 games. If that gives you a sense of the quality of teams they've beaten, they don't have a bad loss. They don't have a quadrant 3. They don't have a quadrant 4 loss. They have a couple quadrant 2, but it's been a good job, man. I have been impressed with what they've done. I don't think they can play at the pace they want to play with kind of the personnel they have right now on short bench, but I like what they do. Modern basketball, it's kind of not basketball in a phone booth, and it's fun. Defensively, they're not overextended, but they play hard. Outside that BYU game and a couple other instances, they're usually very good on the defensive end. So I've been impressed. I really have. I think that Darren DeVries has pretty much been kind of what he was billed to be in year 1, regardless of how these last 6 games go.
Yeah, I think Frank and I have talked about that. There's just a different feeling about the basketball program, even though we have lost some games, probably felt like we should have won. I think most people feel good about the program. And I know even me personally watching games, last year I was hard pressed to watch. I couldn't take it. And this year they're fun to watch. Yeah, they're fun to watch this year, and they, like you said, they play good defense. They spread it out offensively and do some different things. It's just a different feeling about the program, and I think he's done a good job. And sounds like it's going to get even better if he stays with us. We hope.
Yeah, I think that too. Like they're bringing in a really good recruiting class for next year, and Tucker DeVries is going to be able to come back now after he. I'm not going to count my chickens before they hatch, but I would be shocked if he doesn't get a medical red shirt. You know, you got him and the freshmen and some of these young guys to build around for next year. That's a pretty good nucleus. You know, you go out and get a couple more players. You're talking about a real ball club. I mean, one that's not so short. I mean, you look, guys, they're playing really realistically 8 guys. I know. Harris gets in there every now and then if they need another big, but they're playing 8 guys, and a lot of those guys are playing a ton of minutes. So I can kind of see how this has gone the way it's gone. But had Stone and Tucker, you know, that's going to be kind of the what if here. And that's why I think that he deserves a lot of praise, because they've looked very good. They've found ways to beat teams after Tucker went down that shocked me they would beat. You know, so they've been competitive. You know, even the last 2 they lost, they had a possession to win the game against BYU. They missed an open shot on a kick, and then Baylor, they had chances to win that game and didn't win. But I took more positives from it than negatives.
Yeah, I think we agree, and I think most fans do agree with that. And like I said, I think there's a good feeling about the program, and they're fun to watch. Keen, we're not going to hold you past our deadline here. We want to make sure we get you where you need to be, but we would love to have you back sometime after the spring, whatever it was, bonanza
showcase.
Yeah, the showcase. Yeah, we'll get you back after that and get some more insights. Been a blast talking to you and hearing from the inside what's going on up there. It's pretty exciting. Frank, you want to finish this up here?
Well, I was going to say he's the real deal. Everybody out there, if you haven't done it already, wvsports.com, Rivals. Really, he has so many insights, as you heard today. A lot of really good articles and perspectives. And Keenan, we can't thank you enough for taking the time.
Hey guys, thanks. Yeah, get in touch with me after spring ball, and once things settle down a little bit, hopefully West Virginia's in the NCAA tournament too. So
there you go.
Yeah, the good news is spring will end earlier this year. That's kind of a twist that Rich is doing, and it's by design. You know, they're going to start spring next week and end it by the 5th, basically so they can kind of evaluate their roster, figure out what's going on, and then attack the portal and find kind of. So I hope they don't attack it too much. You know, that's all I've been doing is chasing transfer portal. But I do expect quite a few more additions. If there's one thing you can bank on right now is this ain't done. You know, they're going to continue to add guys.
Right. All right, Kim, we appreciate you so much. Thanks for joining us, buddy.
Appreciate it.
All right. Frank, that was a long interview, but informative and interesting and enjoyable. Not too long, though, for us to not be able to bring in our special guest and our old friend of the show, Coach Darryl Prue. Darryl, appreciate you hanging in there with us while we got the interview done. Welcome to the show.
Hey, how y'all doing? It was nice to see you, Greg.
Yep, good to see you, buddy. It's been a long winter for me so far, but coming back.
That's good. That's what it's about. Strong. That's what I want to hear.
Let you here before we start. You got the head coaching job at St. Charles in Maryland, and you just finished up your regular season last night. Let's hear a little bit about it real quick here before we move on to WVU.
Oh man, we started off really strong. We went 7-2, then we had a little glip in January. But then we played last night. We went on a 4-game win streak. We're doing pretty good. Hopefully, we get ready for the playoffs. I hope, I got a lot of guys that didn't play varsity last year. A lot of players that played JV, but I got a super sophomore that's amazing. He's since awesome. I started him, he's averaging over 20 points a game.
Did I read that right? Did I read that right, Darryl? He had 32 last night.
Yeah, you read it right. It was he didn't score. He scored 0 points in the first quarter,
and he had 32.
Wow. And they played zone. He hit 6 threes. He was driving in there getting and ones. It was just, you run all the plays you want to run. You know how that is, Chris. And against zones, you sometimes just got to play basketball.
Yep.
And so they were stopping all our plays. So I just said, let's run motion, and we ran motion. We passed, cut through the zone, and now he's in different spots, and they got to find him. And it was kind of late getting to him.
Yeah, that's right. You mentioned the plays and that it don't always come down to that. You just got to get that zone. You got to move your bodies, move the ball, and get your scorers open. What's your what's your outlook for the playoffs now? Are you in good position? I don't know a lot about the area, and I know the basketball is great, but I don't know what your region or whatever it is like. What's your outlook there?
We have the regionals coming up, but I think they're still calculating. Still, some other teams have some games left. So we'll know more in the next couple of days. The first game probably won't be till next Friday, not just Friday coming up, but the following Friday.
I know you don't get a lot of time, to watch, but I'm sure you pay attention to the Mountaineer program and what's going on. We want to get your insights on it. That's why we was hoping to get you back in while basketball's still going on. Your insights on WVU and the basketball program right now.
Well, we talked about it last year. They got a good coach. I mean, when you get a good coach and things that happen, you can coach the guys up. I think we were relying on too many transfers before. And we were getting transfers. We was getting not the top transfers. We were just getting players from smaller conferences to come up, and it was taking them a while to get used to the competition that and the urgency at this level, and then when you move on from Coach Huggins, you can't do what Coach Huggins does. You got to do what you do, and I think they didn't find that identity. They never had an identity after Coach Huggins left.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think early in the season, I think this group learned about bringing it every night in the Big 12. You got to have that energy, and you got to come out and play hard every night. I think they've adjusted to that somewhat. I think it's taken them half the season really to get to that point, because we've seen them play some lackluster games, lack of a better term, but they seem like they figured that out just a little bit. They have a tendency, and they're doing it again tonight. I'm watching the game right here. Have a tendency to go through spells where they don't score, and they had a 9-point lead here on Cincinnati, and the second half just started. And now the game's tied, and they've gone a long stretch without scoring points. But that's something they'll overcome as well. Frank, you want to jump in there and hit Darryl with a few questions?
Yeah, well, Darryl and I talk a lot. We might as well announce it on the show tonight, Darryl, that we're working together on a book that's going to feature your life from the very beginning to where you are now. And it's been a fascinating experience for me because I really did not know much. I really didn't know much about DC basketball and the environment that you played in and grew up in. And what's astounded me is so many of the players, including yourself, that I followed when they went to college. The Bonzie Colson at Rhode Island, and the Danny Ferries at Duke, and the Sherman Douglas at Syracuse back in the middle '80s to late '80s, then on to the early '90s. That basketball, inner city basketball in Washington D.C., Metro basketball. On your team, for example, you had two guys that played in the national championship game, college, who against each other, that were your teammates. I mean, talk a bit about what it was like back then, playing in, if you're a 14 or 15-year-old, really having to, you've got to stretch and compete with guys that are going to play major college ball, and a number of them go off and be pros.
Yeah, because where I grew up at, I had to catch the bus or ride my bike to get to a lot of these playgrounds to see all these guys. But I used to read the paper when I was younger. I used to read about Dunbar a lot. And so I was fortunate to walk in the door. I almost left. It was, it'd be in the book. I almost left, and to get there and work with the legendary coach Jodine Davis. And as I was talking to Coach Catlett recently, he was saying Jodine Davidson was before his time. He wanted me to have guard skills. Jodine Davidson back then, I was, as a 15-year-old coming in at 6'6", 6'7", he wanted me to be, not just, you know how it is in some of these other places. You 6'6" in the 10th grade, walking into a school, they all put you in the post, especially back in the 80s. But we had guys that could handle the ball, to play inside, outside. it was an amazing experience. When I went to Dunbar, I got to meet Bobby Dandridge. Bobby Dandridge was a teammate of my head coach at the time. And I had my first pair of Nikes, so I'm walking around with some red and white Nikes with Dandridge on the back of the Nike. So, I thought that was big time. Then a guy named Dr. Carr grabs me and starts taking me to the gym after the season, and every Sunday, I'm playing against Anthony Jones, Bobby Dandridge. I'm playing against Adrian Dantley, all these guys, you know what I mean? So all these guys were playing every Sunday, and it was a controlled run. It'd be 30, 40 people in the gym, and Dr. Carr controlled the run. He'll make me play all day against Bobby Dandridge, win or lose. I had to guard him. If Adrian Dantley was in there, I had to guard him. And I thank God that he recognized, that I had a little bit of a future, and he did that for me. You know what I mean? So, I didn't know how to work on my game at that time, but it made me learn how to play with, elite level guys. And so when I got to college, it was an easy transition. You had to transition some, but it was an easier transition for me because I've already played against guys that, was better than some of the guys that was in college. And, I would not change that part of my process for anything. You know what I mean? So I had a guy when I first walked in named Bernard Campbell. He might be the best power forward to come out of Dunbar. And, they'll say me and Michael Smith, they went to Providence, but this guy, man, he could play inside, outside. He could just do it all. And he was amazing. And, but, the street life caught up with him. So people don't know about, he was a nationally ranked guy too, my sophomore year. Then the next year I had another nationally ranked guy, Tyrone Stretch Jones. And then it was me. So we always had a lineage of guys coming out, one after another.
Yeah. The thing about it, Greg, and you and I talked a little bit about this the other day, is that when I was growing up in Western New York, basketball there, maybe in a conference, these are small towns, 15,000 people, 10,000 people, maybe one or two players would play college ball. Most of them, if they played beyond high school, it would be junior college, community college, and that would be it. But now when you contrast that against what Darryl's talking about, and then you do the pivot, all of us know Darryl, great player, Hall of Fame. As you and I were talking the other day, still, after all these years, going back to 1907, Darryl's in about 20 categories. He's in the top 15, 20 all time. With Jerry West, Hot Rod Huntley, you name the contemporary guys. But the fact that he ended up at West Virginia almost was a miracle. And one of the things we've talked about that doesn't get spoken enough about Darryl Prue is that because a nationally ranked metro player, Philadelphia, Boston, New York, Washington, that type of level, came to West Virginia, it enabled West Virginia to get other players like Chris Brooks to follow. The same thing happened in football too. There's got to be that first guy that comes because we had a history of bringing really good players in from West Virginia and regionally. But when Darryl came, it changed the paradigm, so to speak, the way that WVU did business. And to follow that is amazing. And, Darryl was going to end up at Georgetown, and that didn't happen. And it's a blessing because West Virginia's basketball went up more than a notch because of Darryl coming.
Yep. Yeah, I think when you you look back during his era, and he mentioned some of the players, that were in the college ranks at that time and where they played. It was sort of the evolution of the game, and I think that's what Darryl brought to WVU. It was the evolution. He had that, and I've said this before, that smooth left-handed J out there, man, the best you ever seen. He'd get off the floor like nobody's business, and it was just a player, the likes that we hadn't really seen before. And like you said, I think that just elevated WVU's program. and made people realize that they can come to WVU and have success and be noticed. And thank you for that, Darryl, for sure.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I think, I think it was a perfect match. I think because I was allowed to catch the ball in the wing, dribble the ball some, make passes that people didn't think I could do coming out of high school. It was all, inside stuff, rebounding, inside stuff, rebounding, but, I wasn't the tallest. I wasn't the most explosive guy, but I had great hands and great instincts. But I was able to use all of my other stuff, like getting all the steals and, setting other guys up, being a team guy. I did, I think basketball started evolving after that. Like now I'm the norm. A guy 6'7", 6'8", that can handle the ball, could dribble, play inside and out. Back then he was either inside or he was outside. So it wasn't no in between. I remember going to the playground, I grab a rebound, I take off on a dribble, and the guards be like, "Oh, you think you're a guard? You think you're no, I'm just, I'm just doing what I can do." Now everybody's taller than me dribbling the ball up court, and that's all he's the next Magic Johnson, he's the next KD. When I try to do it, I'm thinking I'm a point guard. I'm taking them away from them. But I think that was the vision of my coach, Jodine Davison, and I think Coach Catlett just expanded on it. Just back then, when I first started, there was no 3-point line, so I wasn't chucking up a lot of threes. As I got older, that came about. But that took me to a different level as a player. But if I would have that kind of, teaching, or have someone if I have someone like me teaching, say a Jeff Green, like I did Jeff Green, doing that with me, it would have been we've been in a different conversation after I left, West Virginia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was thinking about, as you were talking, when I came to Michigan State, first year, that was the year that Michigan State won the championship, that great game with Magic Johnson against Larry Bird, that really changed and did an upshift of college basketball altogether. I still think it's the most watched NCAA championship game ever. But what was interesting about that, the same thing, when I came, everyone said, this guy is playing forever at high school. He's 6'8", and he's the point guard. And so I would go to the games and see this big 6'8" guy. And then what was amazing, forget the offense. It was when they were playing the matchup zone, because Judd Heathcote loved to play that matchup zone. And you'd see these point guards come down the court, 5'10", 6 feet, and there's Magic Johnson right in your face. And so sometimes we forget there are times when it shifts, it changes from the normal to a new normal. You were part of that clearly at West Virginia, and you and I have talked about this forever. And that is Gail Catlett, maybe because of his personality, just has never gotten the credit he deserves. I mean, he's so far ahead in terms of the number of wins, in terms of Mountaineer basketball. And we've had great coaches who have not stayed that long, and we know that. I mean, George King, and, you go down the list, Freddie Schaus, great coaches, Bob Huggins. But he was a perfect coach for you, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. I mean, he's very honest, and I really appreciate that, because I didn't get a lot of that after my second coach in high school. And that's all I wanted a man to be, is honest with me. And we worked on things. If I wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing, he checked me. You know what I mean? So, I was easily accountable, because I knew if I've done something wrong, I wasn't doing something right, he would get me online. But, it's like, you said about Chris and stuff like that. I didn't look at it when Chris came in, because honestly, we played the same position, but we played together. You know what I mean? So, it's, so, Coach might have had that vision of how, us two playing together, getting other guys to come in. I think he opened up, going back to what you said about, Magic Johnson. Like before I came here, I don't think the depth of our teams were that great. No offense to anybody, but, getting some of the guys we got that was coming in, they were practice players. We needed, especially at the end, we played a team like Duke. We go 6 deep, maybe 7, and they come off with 2 6'10", 260-pound guys. You know what I mean? So, the depth back then was, just, it's changed. I think it changed when Chris, and then you get Lawrence Pollard, Mike Boyd, and all them guys. And it changed with, Beeline, and it changed with, Coach Huggins, and DeVries will be fine. He'll get his group, and he'll start, putting his imprint here at WVU. But I know Indiana is chirping away, so we'll see how that works.
Yeah, I think that's our big fear.
Yeah, he's a Midwest guy. It's a little different. It's a little different. You got to be creative to recruit and have more ties on the East Coast here at West Virginia, because it's you got to use the DC area. You got to use New York, Philly. I think
No way. Yeah.
If you don't, I think you set yourself up for whatever, because I think West Virginia, even with football and basketball, from West Virginia all the way up to New York, has some great players, and even down into Florida, especially with the football.
Yeah.
Well, Greg, we'll do this again, but it's so good to see Darryl, and we haven't had him on Wednesdays because his teams play. This is an unusual. This is the first Wednesday where they haven't played, but
we need to get him back after he have him bring that big trophy with him when he comes.
Don't jinx me, Greg.
I didn't say which trophy. I didn't say big trophy. I'm sure you got some sitting around there.
I got a few sitting around. I can show a few old ones.
Yeah, you should pull one out. Nobody's going to know.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, Darryl, we appreciate you, man. It's good to see you again. And we ran a little short of time tonight, but we'll get you back on for sure. When your season gets wrapped up, you have a little bit of time for us. We'll definitely have you back in the fold. We miss you.
Yeah, I would love to come back. I miss being on these podcasts, especially with Dale. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
I definitely enjoy these podcasts.
Yeah,
awesome.
We all miss
have you back.
Dale.
Yes, sir. No question about it. But as soon as your season gets wrapped up and you got a little time, we'll get you back in here, and we'd like to have your expertise and your insights on the basketball. So be back in time for maybe if WVU makes the NCAA tournament, we can talk some about that. Whether they're playing tonight, I'm not sure they're going to make the tournament if they don't get straightened out here. But we look forward to that. Look forward to having you back. Appreciate you coming on tonight.
One last thing before you go, Darryl. That's that player had 32 points. Jamari Rogers, is that the player? Yeah. Yes. Watch. Remember that name, folks. Jamari Rogers. He's sneaky fast, and he's only a sophomore. We'll keep him.
Yeah. He's dynamic. He can run a team. He can shoot it. He can drive it. He plays good defense. So he's an all-around player. So
great.
I don't know what the system is like there, but do you fear losing him to somebody? I mean, I know here there's a dynamic player at one school.
I do, but I think we'll be fine. I think we'd be fine. I think he had an older brother that went to a private school. It didn't kind of work out. So, and I think the parents know. I think he knows I have enough connections to help him out. So
good deal.
I think I just got to get some players to match him.
There you go. Yeah, get some in there with him. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Awesome. All right, Darryl. Appreciate you, buddy.
All right.
Hey, you take care, buddy. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yep.
All right, Darryl. Take care. Well, Frank, that's going to be a wrap. Went a little long tonight. That interview was pretty long, so I think we need to wrap it up. And I'll let you take over and mention next week's show, next week's guest. And then we'll sign her off.
Great, super. This is going to be interesting for everyone. It's not very often we have people on a person. I'm going to say people, but a person who has two names. Jeff Sniffen played football for the Mountaineers in the late 80s as an offensive tackle. He's the guy on the left. Of course, that's we all know who the guy on the right is. And Jeff was on the team in '88 when we played Notre Dame in that great Fiesta Bowl. And but now he's Jeff Chase, and he's an actor. And Greg and I were talking the other day that he has a list of credits. I mean, incredible. He's done a very good job. He does a combo of roles, and you can see some of the very popular films he's been in. And in fact, we're getting him just before he's getting on a plane to go to Eastern Europe to do another film. So I've had a chance to get to know him. He is He's going to be a great interview. Has a lot of great stories. Jeff Sniffen, Jeff Chase, next Wednesday night on Mountaineer Locker Room, Then and Now.
So Frank, we're going to have to figure out what we call him. When we get him on the show, we don't want to, call him a name he don't want to be called by. So we'll have to get that straightened out. But
That's a good
yeah,
kid.
I read that list of credits. I was like, my gosh, he's been in everything. I mean, it was a huge list and some big name movies and shows that he's been on. So that's pretty awesome when you look. I think I don't know if they're the only two, but Tim Agee is another one that
Yes,
done acting and still involved, I think, in that. So that's
Yeah.
kind of unusual. I don't know how many football programs in the country can say, yeah, we have a
Yeah.
lot of actors coming out.
Well, one thing we got to ask him. One thing we got to ask him is that when they do these fight scenes, they obviously practice them. And Jimmy Smits, did you read about this? That there was one scene.
Yes.
Jimmy Smits couldn't quite get it right, but they filmed it anyway. And he was supposed to put a knife into an area that was not Jeff's body, but he missed it. And so we got to ask him what it was like to get stabbed during a film.
It wasn't worth it.
Yeah.
What if his pay went up over that? Maybe we were paying this guy a little extra. to
Crazy.
That stab wound.
Yeah.
All right, Frank. This has been fun, enjoyable.
Yeah.
Looking forward to next week and can't wait for that. But we appreciate everybody for tuning in and hanging in there with us. A little long show tonight, but we do appreciate you. We appreciate everybody watching. Darren working in behind the scenes, taking care of business. Looks great as always, and we appreciate him as well as all of our viewers on NRN and the Voice of College Football. Thank you again for watching, and we will see you next Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Good night, everybody.